This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9.
I call to order this regular meeting of the Eau Claire County Board on this Tuesday, September the 18th, 2018. I have a brief announcement. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Eau Claire County Board meeting. This meeting is being broadcast live by Valley Media Works on Charter Channel 994, WRFP-LP 101.9 FM, and online at valleymediaworks.org. Supervisors, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of reflection by Supervisor Moritz. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll be giving the moment of reflection.
Oh, sorry.
We had a short meeting just before we started. Is this picking up?
Oh, sorry. Should be on now.
Okay, thank you. As we looked back at the funeral that we recently had for John McCain, we were reminded that great things can come from anyone who persists in doing the best they possibly can.
We can't hear.
Is that better?
According to this, it's on. But no, that's off. Right now.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Thank you. Starting again, as we heard from the many folks that spoke at the funeral and prior to that about John McCain's life, we recognize that there were many things that he gave us, and there are many things that with the right direction in our own lives and the effort that we might put forth, we can give to others as well. With that in mind, you may recall we had a statesman, Winston Churchill, at the beginning of World War II, who was perhaps as instrumental in coming to the aid of the Allies as anyone. He was a speaker, but he had not been a speaker as he grew up. In fact, he stumbled over his words. He didn't write well. And so he picked up prose and he rewrote it and he studied and he rewrote it and he just went over and over and over. And finally he got it down. We can do much the same. On occasion, at the beginning of the war, he was asked to deliver a speech to the commencement group at Oxford. He stood up in front of the group. He addressed them. He said, "Never give up. Never, never, never." And he turned and walked back to his seat. We can learn a couple of things from that. Certainly, one of them is to be concise and not overspeak, and another is to make a clear point, which evidently he did, because that was 80 years ago, and I'm sure more than a few people here have heard that one as well. I have a book that I picked up, Dale Carnegie's scrapbook, and it addresses some of these things. I'll just read a couple of them very quickly, keeping in mind the lesson from Winston Churchill. One is from Cardinal James Gibbons. "Stand strong" is my heading to it. "I have lived 86 years. I have watched men climb to the success, hundreds of them, and all of the elements that are important for success. The most important is faith. No great thing comes to any man unless he has courage." And a second one from General Omar Bradley. "Bravery is the capacity to perform properly even when scared half to death." And Charles Kettering from General Motors. "I have found that if I have faith in myself and I have faith in the idea that I am holding, I usually win." From someone that we'll recognize. This woman was ashamed because she had to wear makeover dresses from clothes that her aunts had worn, ashamed because she couldn't dance very well, didn't know how to skate, and ashamed because other girls told her that she was not very good. But finally, she was able to say, the big thing that eventually gave me courage was helping people who were worse off than myself. Her name, Eleanor Roosevelt. Help others and we help ourselves in the process. Benjamin Disraeli, there is no education like adversity. And from Plutarch, the measure of a man is the way he bears up under misfortune. We learn from our mistakes, hardly from the things that we do well, often more from the things we don't. Two persons cannot long be friends if they cannot forgive each other little failings. And from Henry Ford, he said, all Fords are exactly alike, but no two men are exactly alike. Give the other person some room. We are unique, and we need to be recognized for that.
I'm going to call on Winston Churchill's bid for brevity.
Thank you. Very good.
And thank you, Supervisor Anton. Next on our agenda is a roll call. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and indicate your presence. Let me get that up. Technology isn't always our friend. Okay. Supervisor Moritz, Supervisor Knight. There you go. Okay. Thank you. We have 29 members present. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is the approval of the Journal of Proceedings, which we do by a voice vote. You have a copy of the Journal of Proceedings in your packet. Chair will entertain a motion for approval. Motion by Supervisor Henning, second by Supervisor Miller. No, I'm sorry, Supervisor Schroffnagel. Are there any additions, corrections, deletions for the Journal of Proceedings? I see none. Therefore, all in favor of approval of the Journal of Proceedings indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed by nay. The ayes have it, unanimous consent. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment. This is the time at which we invite the public to make comment. The comments are limited to 3 minutes each, and I will carefully watch that. The total time allotted for public comment is half an hour, so I will make sure we don't go over that. I have in front of me the sign-up sheet, and I'm going to take people in the order in which they have signed up. The first person up is Linda Ladolce. Ladolce?
She wishes not to speak.
Oh, not to speak. Sorry. Would help if I would read it. The second person indicating a wish not to speak is Pat Everhart. The next person who is speaking is Kim Dupre. So please identify yourself by your name and your residence, your address.
Is this turned on?
No.
Do I need to do something? Okay, can you hear me? No? It looks kind of dead here, quite frankly.
Everything's on.
Okay. Should I just talk really loud?
That would help.
It's directional, but it should be picking up.
Okay. My name is Kim Dupre. I For 20 years, I lived in Emerald, Wisconsin. I just recently moved to Minnesota, but I came tonight to share with you the story of Emerald Sky Dairy and our experience over the last couple of years at Emerald Sky Dairy near Emerald, Wisconsin. A local farmer had started Emerald Sky Dairy about 15 plus years ago, and with assurances from the DNR that everything would be fine, but as time passed, everything was not fine. I had 5 neighbors in my square mile that could not drink their water due to high nitrates. The town hall, which sat right across the road from Emerald Sky Dairy, their nitrate reading this past year was at 32. The limit is 10. We've had the well that when it was originally dug at the town hall 10 years ago was at 6.9 in nitrates. So over that 10-year time, it went from 6.9 to 32. That's significant. A little over a year ago, an anonymous tip came into the county and the DNR and said that there had been a significant manure spill. And when the county staff dispatched, they found a lot of manure in a stormwater pond that was draining into adjacent wetlands. This had gone unreported by the owners for several months, and was so egregious that after the DNR finished their investigation, they have forwarded it now to the Wisconsin Department of Justice, where it sits right now. Just a couple of months before that spill was discovered, our county board had passed on the opportunity to install a CAFO moratorium because of some threats of lawsuits and didn't want to be anti-farming. Instead, they installed a water study committee. And they felt obviously very blindsided after this spill had happened, after all the assurances from the owners and several of their fellow industrial producers that everything would be fine. Our county board felt very blindsided. A few weeks after this spill was discovered, and it was also cleaned up, there was a cluster of homes about a mile southwest of us that came up with E. coli in their water. There was no change in the water's color or odor, very concerning. And one of the homes was actually the local plumber who tested their water religiously every year for 20 years and had never, ever, ever had a problem until last year. And the families had no idea about the spill because they hadn't been notified. The county only notified people within a 2-mile range.
Excuse me, please bring your comments to a close.
When the DNR found out about it, they only were suggested to bleach the wells and go on with it. Now I ask you, if that had happened in your water system here in Eau Claire City, is that all that would happen? Wouldn't there be a hair on fire time that something needed to be done and people needed to be communicated with? My neighbor was pregnant. I had another neighbor with getting chemo. So there's a fairness issue, I think. But I think mostly what we learned from the experience was be prepared. Not every big farmer is a bad actor, but that's why you have rules and regulations, is because when the bad actors or those who are less than honest do come along, you're prepared for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dewayne Poeple. I'm going to ask our next speaker to stand ready. That's Kate Beaton.
Good evening. My name is Dewayne Poeple. I live at 4344 Parkwood Drive in the town of Seymour, Eau Claire County. I own a home and I'm a resident there. For 37 years, I worked in the environmental field. In 2015, I retired from the Department of Natural Resources as the regional CAFO specialist. I covered farms from Vernon County clear up to Iron County in Ashland. I issued probably 400 permits during my career, WPDS permits. I inspected all the farms in the operations in the area. I dealt with their development. I know that process. I support this moratorium because, first of all, this moratorium is not going to hurt the local farmers. I've never known a farmer to go through a corporation structure, permitting process, public hearings, plan and spec review, and is able to construct within a year. The only people that develop operations in a very short period of time are the corporate structures. They have the people to send to Madison to walk through plans and specs. They have package applications. They can do it in 7 months, and they will do it, and you won't even know they're here. I got a call in my office one day from an equipment supplier in Clark County. Said, what do you know about an 8,000 cow operation in Bayfield? I said, I know nothing. He was requested to do a bid on the farm site. I got a hold of Bayfield County. They knew nothing about the development. They looked through their records and discovered that someone had purchased property in the town of Eileen. We went out and talked to the farmer, and the farmer said, oh yeah, I sold my, the corporation developed a local name. They were actually based in Iowa. I went out to the site with the local county representatives, and he showed us. He showed us where the farm was going to be built, how it was going to be developed. He knew everything all about it already. And Bayfield County went back and discovered that they had no laws in effect to protect that operation from that coming into the town of Eileen. DNR does not deny these permits. They issue them. DNR does not look at whether a farm should be or should not be in an area. They establish a permit and give the farm the guidelines they need to meet the laws of Wisconsin. Because the Bayfield government structure there was unable to stop that farm, the locals had to come forward. And the local protest is essentially what has kept that farm operation out of that area. The same situation occurred in Chippewa County. The operation that came from Minnesota to put a hog operation in the town of Cleveland, Chippewa really didn't have anything established to stop that large hog operation from coming into that area. It was local opposition that drove them out.
Excuse me, Mr. Poeple, please bring your comments to a close.
Okay. This moratorium is more to protect you as a government body than anybody, because you're the ones that have to answer to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kate Beaton, followed by Beth Ivanovic.
Thank you. Good evening, supervisors. I'm Kate Beaton, and I live in Eau Claire in the 3rd Ward. And in my day job, I work for Wisconsin League of Conservation Voters, a nonprofit that advocates for strong environmental policy on the state and local level to ensure that every Wisconsinite can be sure, knowing that the water that's coming out of their taps is clean and safe for them and their families to drink. But unfortunately, not all Wisconsinites have access to clean water. Private wells across our state are unsafe to drink, and some so polluted that brown manure water comes straight from the tap. This is wrong morally, and we owe it to the people in Eau Claire County to make sure that this doesn't happen to them, which is why I'm asking you to support a study committee and the moratorium. I understand that you were sent a letter today by the Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce against the study committee and temporary moratorium. WMC defines themselves on their website as Wisconsin's leading business association dedicated to making Wisconsin the most competitive state in our nation. My organization, WLCV, has a lot of experience with Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, most notably when WMC fought hard against our efforts to ensure that children of Wisconsin have lead-free water to drink. We have seen firsthand WMC work in the shadows to intimidate state legislators with letters like the one you received today. WMC works to advance business. They work for the biggest polluters of our state, not to protect natural resources and our health. The temporary CAFO moratorium in your packet is a means to protecting our natural resources and our health. So please don't let WMC intimidate you. The health of our community is dependent on you standing strong for your values of access to safe drinking water for all of us. As I've seen WMC prevent environmental protections on the state level, I feel really scared that they are looking now to impact policy in my own home county. With their help, a CAFO could apply to enter a county before a temporary moratorium is passed, starting an irreversible application process. We need time as a county to assess how we can best handle industrial-sized farms on the local level. So I ask you to please vote on and pass this temporary moratorium and study committee as soon as possible before it's too late. I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you, as always, for doing what's right by our county. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Beth Ivanovic, followed by Tammy Smith Schroeder.
Hi, my name is Beth Ivanovic. I'm a resident of Eau Claire County. I am in favor of passing this 1-year moratorium on confined animal feeding operations, along with a study group. This past weekend, I emailed each of you my top concerns. I tried to be brief in that letter. I probably could have sent you 15 pages. My concerns boil down to the following. The environmental concerns of CAFOs lead to public health issues, and appropriate land use decisions need to be based on data and facts. Do we have current updated data and facts for Eau Claire County in regard to quality and quantity of water? No, we do not. Do we know the sensitive areas in Eau Claire County in which we should be extra careful with certain land use practices? Again, no, we do not. Are our ordinances up to date? Have we looked at other options for the county to assist the DNR in monitoring potential hazardous practices or review what other counties might be doing to protect public health from increasing nitrates, viruses, antibiotic resistance, bacteria, smells, and odors that are all parts of the package with CAFOs? Eau Claire County will have more CAFOs in the future. This is the wave of agriculture. We can't stop it. With these industries and their environmental concerns come a host of public health concerns. I am here for everyone who will be a neighbor to one of these industries. I am here for the 25% of people that rely on well water for their drinking water. Voting for a moratorium is going to give us time to figure out the issues. A moratorium will show that we are all concerned about public health issues and the public health of our residents, and that we place a priority on making informed decisions. Thank you for serving. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tammy Smith Schroeder, followed by Steve Stray.
I am Tammy Smith Schroeder, one of the owners of Bears Grass Dairy, Inc., a 400-cow dairy located between Augusta and Fall Creek. I am opposed to the livestock moratorium. This moratorium will require me to put my business plans on hold for at least a year. We have been in discussions with the DNR and with our banker regarding expansion. We even had the building staked out on our farm. We have been upgrading our farm and purchased additional land as we get things in line for an expansion. In tough economic times, we need to be ready for any opportunities that may present themselves. Section 1 of the proposed moratorium discusses water quality. Animal agriculture is not the only source of water pollutants, yet this moratorium affects only animal agriculture. Water quality is everyone's concern, not just animal agriculture. The 60-cow dairy is disappearing from Wisconsin's landscape. They are disappearing for many reasons. Facilities need to be upgraded. There is no next generation to take over, or the farmer is injured, and again, no one is there to take over for him. This moratorium will not save the 60-cow dairy, and it may prevent some farmers from staying in business as they decide to combine their farm with one of their neighbors or relatives. Combining with a relative is what we did 13 years ago. Combining with relatives or neighbors was relevant then, and it is just as relevant today. This moratorium could prevent some of those farmers from staying in business. Many of you are concerned about manure runoff and manure spills. I too am concerned about manure runoff and manure spills. The publicity from a manure spill or a manure runoff negatively affects every livestock producer. Every farmer participating in farmland preservation has a nutrient management plan. This plan deals with chemical nutrients as well as organic nutrients. Part of that plan requires us to keep records of where we apply manure. At our farm, we can go back 9 years and tell you where each load of manure has been applied. We also must have a plan in place should a spill occur. Every one of our owners and employees know what our plan is and know how to implement it. Even our neighbors know what our plan is. This moratorium does not implement NR 151. I feel NR 151 should be implemented countywide. How can Eau Claire County manage manure coming into the county to be applied on a crop farmer's land without NR 151? I have spoken before the county board in the past. Each one of those talks offered an invitation for you to come to our farm. That invitation is still open, and I encourage you to contact me and set up a time to visit Bears Grass Dairy. You all have my email contact. I thank you for the time and hope to see you on my farm soon.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Steve Stray, followed by Joe Luginbill.
Good evening. I'm Steve Stry. I am a farmer in the Foster area of Eau Claire County. I'm also proud to say that I am the Eau Claire County Farm Bureau president. I'm actually a little disappointed and a little upset to even be here tonight. We were in this same chamber about 3 weeks ago, and the same issue about the moratorium was brought up. I am against the livestock moratorium, and I'll tell you why. We were in this chamber, and it was brought in front of the Land Conservation Committee, and at that point they saw that the issues facing Eau Claire County had absolutely nothing to do with what this moratorium is trying to stop. What this moratorium is a scare tactic. It is fear-mongering of the people to try to demonize the farmers and to beat them down. This is, now beware, this is phase one of the whole grand scheme of what these people are trying to accomplish now. This is just the beginning. A wise man stood at this podium on that night and he said, fear and emotion. Fear and emotion have no business in decision-making processes, and he was exactly right. Decisions need to be made on knowledge and facts. If you haven't read a conservation plan and you haven't wrote a 590 nutrient management plan, if you don't know what NR 151 standards are and you don't know what best management practices are, you have no right to make a decision about something as important as this moratorium. You are not worthy to make a decision about my business the way I feed my family. Facts need to be used to make decisions. We have these people in Eau Claire County. They're called Land Conservation Department. They're called Natural Resources Conservation Service. They're called UW Extension. They're called Farm Service Agency, and they're called agriculture producers just like me. These are the experts. These are the people that need to make these decisions. If the Eau Claire County Board wants to make a decision on something as important as this moratorium, they need to spend the next several months educating themselves on the way agriculture actually is in Eau Claire County. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joe Luginbill, followed by Liz Spencer.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and supervisors and friends. My name is Joe Luginbill, and I have the privilege of serving as the president of the Eau Claire School Board. As a fellow elected official, I want to first thank you for your great service to our community. Tonight I'm speaking to you as a lifelong resident of Eau Claire and as a proud LGBTQ American. Developing, growing, and sustaining a healthy community is about ensuring that we can be a place where all people, young and old, can live, work, play, and learn in a safe and supportive environment. Tonight, I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to the Eau Claire City County Board of Health, Human Services Board, and Judiciary and Law Committee for all passing strong statements opposed to the practice of conversion therapy on minors in Eau Claire and in the state of Wisconsin. Tonight, I hope that you will consider voting yes to the County Board resolution titled Conversion Therapy, sending a message to the community and across the state that all children are worthy and deserving of love despite their sexual orientation or identity. Conversion therapy is a medically discredited practice in which someone tries to make a gay child straight or revert or resist a gender change. Medical groups have linked the therapy to depression and suicide. And if this seems like perhaps an issue that doesn't matter in our local community, just last week I was at a meeting at the Family Support Center, and one of the caseworkers there told me a story about a friend of hers who in the 1990s was subjected to conversion therapy in our county, and that friend later went on to commit suicide. According to a 2010 report of the American Psychological Association, the techniques therapists have used to try to change sexual orientation and gender identity include inducing nausea, vomiting, providing electric shocks, using shame to create aversion. Other techniques include trying to make patients' behavior more stereotypically feminine or masculine, teaching heterosexual dating skills, using hypnosis, all based on the scientifically discredited practice and premise that being LGBTQ is somehow a defect or disorder. All of the nation's leading professional medical and mental health associations have rejected conversion therapy as unnecessary, ineffective, and dangerous. And our own Board of Health has joined that chorus, a chorus that includes the American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association. the World Mental Health Organization. The World Health Organization. Conversion therapy can be extremely dangerous, abusive, and in some cases fatal. In a 2009 report issued by the APA, it concluded that the reported risks of the practices included depression, guilt, hopelessness, homelessness, shame, suicidality, substance abuse, and high-risk behaviors.
Please bring your comments to a close.
Thank you. The overwhelming scientific evidence demonstrates that conversion therapy, especially when it is practiced on young people, is neither medically nor ethically appropriate and can cause substantial harm. There are many things that young people need, but breaking them down based on their sexual or gender identity is not one of them, and in fact, it's inexcusable. Our young people deserve acceptance, support, and love. And as part of your dedication to protecting all youth, I hope that tonight you will be able to vote yes on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Liz Spencer, followed by Eleanor Wolf.
Hi there. My name's Elizabeth Spencer. I live on the East Side Hill in Eau Claire. I'm a resident of the city of Eau Claire and Eau Claire County. I am in favor of this moratorium, and I think the gentleman from the Farm Bureau expressed the best arguments for being in favor, and that we all need more information and more time to learn about best farm practices and ways to help those farmers who might not be as responsible to take care of their land and our environment, to protect our water, our air, and the health of the people and the animals. I have two concerns. One is, I don't know if I've heard this addressed as much, is the density of these CAFOs. You know, one CAFO here and there may not be a big deal, but we regulate like the number of alcohol licenses, and I'm not sure that's a good analogy, but nevertheless, we regulate the number of these licenses on something that would affect the health of our citizens. So it seems to me to protect our environment and the health of our people and the health of our animals that the number of these permits needs to be addressed also. We could figure that out in the timing of providing this moratorium so that we have time to figure out what density would be safe. The other issue is the antibiotic resistance. Nationally and internationally, this is a huge problem, antibiotic resistance. There are new regulations about antibiotic resistance, or about antibiotics in low-grade antibiotics in animal feed, but they're very weak and have led to international antibiotic resistance. So in a large 1,000, 5,000, 7,000 animal production unit, there would be a much greater opportunity for disease to spread, and the antibiotic resistance, when used in animal feed by these large operations, which is almost universal, would be another issue that needs to be addressed. So I know you guys want to go home and not spend a lot of time here, so I don't think I used all my 3 minutes, right?
Not quite.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Eleanor Wolf, followed by Rich Mayville.
Mr. Chair, I choose not to speak tonight. Others have stated many of the issues that I wanted to raise, so I feel comfortable that we've made our points.
Thank you. Rich Mayville? Am I pronouncing the name correctly? Is he present? Oh, sorry.
Is it Stroke on there?
Sorry?
Is it Stroke, the last name?
Yes, I'm sorry. I couldn't read it. My fault.
My name is Rick Stroke. I'm a resident of our Eau Claire County, town of Bridge Creek. I am a member of the Land Conservation Committee. My daughter asked me what I was going to say when I got up here, and I said, I don't know. It seems like times are changing. The American farmers are defending themselves. I think we have done too good of a job for too long. You go in your grocery stores, you look at the amount of food and the quality of food that we produce. People have taken it for granted. They expect it from us now. The process of getting the food to the supermarket is not always as neat and clean as it looks when it's in the store. It's well packaged. You look at the variety. We offer many varieties of food. Look what we do with milk, chocolate milk, skim milk, you name it. If there's a market, we have produced it. We have tried to fill it. Organic farms. One of the largest organic, I think the largest organic farm in the state of Wisconsin is right over in Marathon County. I believe it's close to 4,000 head. It's a K-full farm. Organic, no antibiotics. These are good operations. They're getting labeled, getting a bad name because in other areas, negative makes the news. That seems to be what makes news nowadays, when something is negative, not positive. That's all we're hearing about. Again, I hear negative things about the American farmer. Antibiotics. We're getting accused of using too many antibiotics in our feed. I'll answer that. How many prescriptions are either filled or handed out in the city of Eau Claire every day? Overuse, but the American farmer is being targeted for overuse of antibiotics. Diseases and bacteria, people are blamed for that. You know, they're getting them resistant to antibiotics. Again, any disease anywhere in the world is no more than one plane ride away. It can be here from another country. It's not that we'll not get the disease, it's what do we do when we get there. It's all about knowledge. Knowledge is going to be the key to the moratorium. How do we react when there is a problem? Some state areas do have manure spills. They're uncommon. We do have standards. What were the standards when these manure spills happened? I mean, we don't know any details about them. What has happened? We are also going to be having farm technology days in Eau Claire County in less than 2 years. This moratorium, by the end of the week, more than likely will be on every newspaper, farm agricultural newspaper in the state of Wisconsin. People are watching this. I said this is not good publicity. I think we have the NR 151. I think it's sufficient. We've been working with land conservation. Conservation plans were required back in mid-1980s. We have 590 nutrient management plan. We have erosion control plans. We do cost sharing on soil sampling. Those are all good, but the only thing we are missing is the NR 151 so that we can do enforcement of the standards set by farmland preservation. As a farmer, those are excellent standards, and I really do not see no need for a moratorium on K-full farms. The NR 151 would be more than sufficient. I guess.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
That concludes our public comment period. I see no other names on our sign-up sheet, and I don't think that there's anyone else who wishes to speak. Okay. That concludes our public comment period. The next item on our agenda is reports to the county board under 2.04.320, beginning with an oral report on our audit from Mr. Brock Guyan.
All right, good evening. Brock Guyan, principal responsible for your annual external audit. Here to talk about the results of your 2017 audit. And I've met with Finance and Budget twice now. We met in early July, and then was requested to come again and answer some additional questions here at the beginning, or just last week. So spent about 3 hours with them. Went through a lot of the results for the audit, and so tonight I'm just planning on giving you a real high-level summary of the results of the audit. And of course, I'm here at your disposal as far as if you have any questions, if there's something I don't address, if you want to talk about that, happy to do so. So what you should have, hopefully in the materials, is an executive audit summary and possibly 2 other documents that are released with the audit. One's a single audit report, and the other one is your audited financial statements. I'm going to talk about your the audit summary. Does that sound appropriate? That's what they have in there? Okay. So if you're following along and you want to review along with me here, in the executive audit summary on page 1, that's where we cover the results of the reports that were issued. So we talk about the opinions issued in the results. So I'll start there. And the first one is your audit opinion. That's on the audited financial statements. We've issued what's called an unmodified opinion. That's the highest level you can receive. It means all the amounts and disclosures included in that document, that booklet, is materially accurate. It should be noted here that this year there was a big change. And that change was that the county itself produced the financial statements. Historically, in every other year, that has been produced by the external auditor. So that was a really big step and improvement this year. Yes?
We don't have any back here. Were they handed out, or were they?
Cover was.
That's the recommended budget.
No, that's not the.
That's not the right document.
No,
We don't have it.
we don't have it.
I received mine under separate cover.
Right.
It's not on our.
Should have received it separately. Not in the packet for tonight, but separately in your mail.
No,
No.
no.
Electronic versions, possibly, or no?
Sorry?
Is there electronic versions website, possibly? Okay.
We're trying to pull it up then.
The electronic version is 107 pages. No offense, Brock.
Yeah, there's
So no one received it by mail?
No.
Wonder why I did. Okay. Catherine? Okay. We're going to try to pull it up. I think we should proceed with the report.
Okay. I'll continue
and
some.
we can set aside time in the following meeting if we need to have a further discussion.
Okay.
And we'll make sure that you have that paper copy by that time.
Yeah. If the electronic becomes available on your materials there, just let me know. All right. So continuing along here, there's a couple other parts. There's a separate report that talks about your internal controls. Okay, that's separate from the audited financial statements. This one keys in on things that you have in place over your disbursements, receipting, journal entry processes. So that's something we're required to test as in addition during the audit as well. We don't just look at the numbers and disclosures. And so when we do that and we test those, we report on it. There are 2 items in there this year. They are carryovers, things that have been reported in the past. One is material audit adjustments. What that one means is we've come in as auditors external to your control structure and proposed adjustments to your books. This is fairly common finding. Again, you've had this in all prior years as well, but there's been substantial improvement here too, actually. This year we were down to, by the time we arrived for field work, there was 56 journal entries that were posted to the trial balance after that point in time. In prior years, it was about double that. And of the 56, half of those were the ones that we came up with during our reconciliations, and the other half were, staff just hadn't finished something. They were finishing up the reconciliation, and they gave us the adjustment to make sure our books matched with the counties. So considering the reduction in the number of journal entries, I'd consider that a very significant improvement. There's still some work to do there, and there's a plan in place to address hopefully the remainder of those, so that going forward there, the obvious goal there would be that there wouldn't be any journal entries once the auditors show up for the audit. The second item is limited segregation of duties. This one gets at basically what's in place to detect and prevent errors and fraud. So when we report on this, we look at things and we say we could see improvements at certain areas across the county that would make your system more robust. Again, here's one where you spent considerable amount of effort and resources in the last few years making improvements. So this is vastly better than it has been. And I think recent history has shown that you've been able to, on the detection side, find stuff internally. Now, that means you still have some work to do. And there's, again, a plan here that the county has in place. Finance and administration have a plan in place to tackle these areas. Since last time I was here last year and we talked about this, they're just, obviously there's some turnover in staff. They were working on different parts of the operation, who does what in the process of AP and payroll transactions, for example. So maybe not as much progress had been made as maybe intended this time last year, but improvements have been made. But the fact remains is still as of, currently there's still work being done, and there's a corrective action plan that is drafted and in place looking ahead. So we'll reassess that in the next audit for your 2018 audit and report on that at that time. The last piece, the last report we issue on is on compliance. So talked about controls, talked about your financial statements. Now we're talking about compliance. So you run a lot of grant programs here at the county. You're subject to a lot of contracts. We review those as we go along as well, and we report on those, and we did not find any items to report in that report there. So good results on that report. Any questions on any of that? All right. Then I would maybe talk just briefly on some financial highlights. So again, in the summary, once you get it, once you're looking through it, you've got a copy? Perfect. All right, I move into page 7 then. If you move through the document, if you did happen to track down a copy, the way this document works is it starts with a summary on page 1 that I just explained. And then there's some resource materials that go through page 6. And on page 7 through the end, there's some financial highlights. And those are the type of things that you'd want to hear from your auditor. And what I'm going to talk about is your general fund, your general operating fund. Most finance folks related to counties would agree that the general fund is your primary one people look at for your financial stability at the county. So a couple things I look at, the change in fund balance. So what was the results for the year, the net income or net loss, some people might refer to that as. And the trend has been pretty good here. There was a small, well, it's relatively speaking, $327,000 reduction in fund balance or loss for the year. That just means expenses exceeded revenues by that amount. And on a budget of $34 million, that's a relatively small variance. There's no expectation that you'd meet exactly at zero. And this does go back and forth depending on the year. 2 years ago, it was a positive $1.2 million. So to give you some perspective for those of you that aren't able to follow along in the materials. So what we do then is we take that knowledge and we apply it to, well, how healthy is the general fund at the end of 2017? And to do that, we look at your fund balance section. That's your reserves. Okay, and you have different components of reserves. In total, you've got $14.6 million, but you can't spend it all. It's not all available for you for the next year's budget, for example. So we put it into separate buckets. You got 2 rows for non-spendable. So delinquent taxes, you haven't collected that money yet, so that's not available to you. We set it aside and we call it some non-spendable. And you also have inventory and prepaid. So that money's already been spent. It's waiting to be used, and that's $566,000. We also call that non-spendable. The other classification you have is about $2.1 million for assigned, and in your case, it's just one item. It's to be applied to your subsequent year's budget, or your 2018 budget. If you remember, we're talking about 2017 financial statements. So of your reserve, you're carved out $2.1 million that you were going to apply then to balance your 2018 budget. So that's what that was set aside for. That leaves your unassigned balance of $10.6 million. That is the number we key in on. That's the one we look at for you guys each year. That's the number we compare to other counties each year. And what we do is we take that $10.6 million, compare that to the $34 million of expenses I talked about earlier, and we come up with a ratio, and that's 31%. So when we look at 31%, what that means to you is you can live on your reserves if you had to for 31% of the next year, in theory. So 3 or 4 months, depending on how you look at it, you could live on your reserves before those would be brought down to zero in an emergency scenario. So, our rule of thumb has been a minimum fund balance policy of 25 to 33%. So you're right in that ballpark. You've got an internal policy of a minimum of 20% and a maximum of 30%. There's been some discussion about possibly reviewing that policy. It's worded a little bit challenging for you to apply that, so something to look at going forward. And for perspective, we work with 11 counties all up here in northwest Wisconsin, and the average there is 48%. So when you take it in relation to that, you are considerably lower. There's reasons each one is a little bit different, but again, that's just for perspective reasons. So I guess with that, I won't get into too much more detail here. You've got fund balance about 31%. Some things that are on your mind you'll have to deal with here in the upcoming budget probably is looking at your HS deficits. Your general fund covered $1.9 million deficit in your HS fund this year. Transferred over to make it whole. It brought it to zero. That's not really a sustainable action, taking $2 million out of fund balance every year or out of your budget. So that's something to take a look at. You want to make sure you're protecting your fund balance against that. And your capital projects fund has got a pretty substantial deficit as well of about $2.2 million at the end of 2017.
Can you repeat that dollar amount that came from the fund balance thing?
Yep. Sure. It's $1.9 million in your HS fund. So what you do as a policy at the end of every year, you look at the results of the HS fund separate from the general fund, and if it's positive, you roll that back to the general fund. If it's negative, you plug that hole, that negative, with the transfer out of the general fund over. And that deficit that you had to cover with the general fund was $1.9 million.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So
other questions?
Yep. Other questions?
Supervisor Wilkie?
I promised not to ask a bunch of questions. I had my shot at you in budget and finance and all those questions.
Right.
I just want one question if you're comfortable with answering. When you look at all these indicators, our fund balance, et cetera, in your opinion, is our financial position as a county improving or deteriorating? Or staying the same?
Fair enough. I would answer that at a very high level, saying you took a little bit of a hit to your fund balance and reserves this year, so it slightly decreased. I wouldn't consider that an enormous red flag. You'll address here in your 2019 budget how things are looking. You'll evaluate for 18 to see if it's like HS fund, how's that doing this year, and other resources you have as well. But in the very short answer to your question, you had a slight dip in your fund balance in the general fund, so I'd consider that slightly weaker financial position than you were last year, but you're within your own policy and you are within our minimum guidelines. That's our minimum, not necessarily a target. So in that respect, you're still healthy. I would put it that way.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Gain.
Yep, my pleasure.
Next item on our agenda is oral report from County Administrator.
Thank you. And I'll just sit here and do that. So I did send all of our board members electronic copies of the audit documents as well as the links to the website where they are posted. And for anyone who would like actual physical copies, if you would let me know, we will be sure to get you those copies as well. And I apologize that you do not have them. The next item of business is the budget. We have spent the last number of months putting this budget together, and when I say we, I am talking about our staff as well as you as the board. And so what you see before you this evening is a compilation of the work of many people. It is strategic. It is geared at addressing the concerns that we as a county have for our overall financial stability into the long term, as well as providing solutions for service. And so I encourage you to take the time to read through the document. We have a high-level view of our expenditures, revenues, areas of risk, because with any budget there are areas of risk. And so again, I would encourage you to take the time to read the document. It is a compilation of many individuals' work. And I would say on behalf of our department managers that I am certain any of them would welcome any of your questions if you want a deeper dive into some of their recommendations or programming. The Finance and Budget Committee is going to be working through the documents, and we will be bringing forward at the October meeting the actual budget from Finance and Budget in the written form. Currently, again, we have all of the materials available for you online so that you can access them at any time without having to save them on your own device. And with that, unless there are any questions, I have nothing else.
Are there questions? Thank you. Any other part of your report?
Not this evening, no, thank you.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is presentation Petitions, claims, and communications, you have these in your packet. A communication from the United States Senate on climate change, 2 rezoning requests received, and finally a communication from Senator Kathleen Vinehout on transportation resolution. Next item on our agenda is the first reading of ordinances by committees. And the first item on there is file number 065.
An ordinance to impose a temporary moratorium on the expansion and creation of large-scale livestock facilities pending a 12-month review.
Supervisor Bates. Ordinarily, this would be referred to the next
Yes,
meeting.
I would assume that this is going to be referred to the next meeting.
Ordinarily, it is, yes. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, I'm speaking
Oh, I'm
to
sorry.
the veterans.
I saw your light on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll take that off.
Supervisor Buchanan.
Yes, in light of the testimony that we heard today and the importance of getting this on the books now, I move that we suspend the rules to take this item up at this meeting.
A motion to suspend the rules has been made. It is in order. Is there a second for that motion? We have a second from Supervisor Russell. This motion is not debatable. Therefore, we move immediately to a vote. A vote of yes would mean that we can take up this item for decision this meeting. A vote of no would mean this item would be put to the next regular meeting of the county board. Please take your keypads in hand and vote accordingly. See that board? Help me.
There's just 2. We're good. It's 14 to 15. 14 yes, 15 no.
14 yes, 15 no. The motion requires a 2/3 vote in order to be effective. Therefore, it fails because 2/3 would be approximately 20 votes. So this item will then be referred to the next county board meeting. Thank you. The next item is,
Mr. Chair?
sorry, Supervisor Leary.
Yes, I noticed that on the agenda, it said that the Land Conservation Subcommittee
Yes.
or Commission had received and acted on that, but also the
Right.
P&D Committee has acted.
That's correct.
But since this is also potentially a financial item, I would ask that the Finance and Budget Committee review this. We will be meeting on Friday, and I think it would be something that might be worthwhile to note if it would have any financial consequences for us, so I would request that referral.
I think that we have to do that by motion referral to committee. Is that correct, Keith? Keith?
Oh, you can just do it.
Can I just-
You can either do it or ask the board. You have the power to do that.
Well, I'll take the power to myself then and refer this item to the Committee on Finance and Budget and ask Supervisor Pagonis to
Add it to the agenda.
add to the agenda. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any other comment, question? Supervisor Gibson?
Yeah, in regards to this moratorium, I would much appreciate from now until our next meeting that each and every one of you either get a hold of the Land Conservation Office or start doing some homework so you can educate yourselves on what laws are out there already to control exactly what they're trying to do with this moratorium. So that way you're well prepared for next meeting.
Thank you. Supervisor Knight?
My point is moot now, so.
Okay, thank you. I see no other indications of wish to speak. The next item is first reading of ordinances and resolutions by members, and we have none in that category. We'll move to item number 10, reports of standing committees, commissions, and boards. There are 2.04.160, and second reading of ordinances, beginning with file number 56.
Requesting the Wisconsin State Legislature to require an audit of the Veterans Trust Fund, detailing the revenue received all disbursements from the Veterans Trust Fund, and the amount of the direct payments paid to veterans for each year since 2014.
Motion? Motion by Supervisor Beckfield regarding this resolution. A second by Supervisor Lavelle. Is that correct? You're seconding? Okay. We have a motion and a second explanation by Supervisor Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I have to turn. You're somewhere in here. Hold on. Oh, here. Sorry.
And it's I guess it is on. Thank you.
Yes.
What you have in front of you is actually a resolution that's in response to a lack of understanding as to what has happened with the veterans' funds for housing. If you look at the chart that was sent with your packet, you can see over the last 10 years that what had been a very substantial amount of money to be used for veterans to be able to not only get into housing, but sometimes for personal loans as well, has shrunk significantly. Initially, this money came from a fund that was lent out, and the interest from that money generated funds to be used over and over again. Unfortunately, there wasn't a real explanation as to why that continued to be an issue, but as it did, the resource for the funding began to come from the reserves of the King's Veterans Hospital. And that was a significant amount of money that was taken out over a number of years. And yet, if we look at the chart, we can see there doesn't seem to be a real understanding as to where the millions of dollars that came out of the trust fund actually went. So the object of this resolution is to encourage our state legislators to take a look-see and do an audit on this particular area of the Veterans Fund. It really has more to do to be sure that it's like with this group. One of our main jobs is oversight. And if we see that it's lacking and we can't see where the funds were expended, nor where they continue to come from, obviously we're interested to know that. So I would encourage your support that we support an effort to see to it that audit takes place. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this? Any other questions? I see none. Therefore, please take your keypads in hand. A vote of yes would be a request to the state legislature to implement an audit. A vote of no would be the contrary. Please vote. Thank you. I think we have a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is file number 48 from the Committee on Human Resources.
Amending Policy 519 of the Eau Claire County Human Resources Employee Policy Manual.
Thank you. Motion by Supervisor Leary, second by Supervisor Kronk. Explanation by Supervisor Beckfield.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we all remember we're on 18-19-048, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The exemplary incentive program was brought up at our last meeting, and rightfully so by Supervisor Pagonis. They'd like the Finance Committee to look it over. They looked it over, gave their blessing, is my understanding. And it's back in front of you tonight for the vote. It's pretty straightforward.
Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We gave it a blessing with no funding. So it's, I wouldn't call it a victory.
Thank you for that clarification.
I wouldn't particularly call that a victory. I would at this point also recommend that it gets reviewed by maybe the admin committee. I understand that this is one piece of a larger spectrum of incentives and employee morale booster type things. I'm a little confused about how, number one, I mean, we're passing a change and we're agreeing on a program without funding it, but I also had some kind of serious concerns about the range, the spectrum of what was involved. So I think that it would be beneficial to get some input from the admin committee as well.
Thank you. Any other comment regarding that? I'm going to take that. This I'd like to handle as a motion. So Supervisor Pagonis, the chair is open to a motion from you to refer this item to the Committee on Administration.
I move to refer this item to the Committee on Administration.
Thank you. Supervisor Bates, are you seconding that?
Yes, I am.
Is there any discussion? Okay, please take your pads in hand and vote. What you're voting on is a referral of this item to the Committee on Administration. So a yes is a referral, a no is not referring.
Oh, what happened to me now?
Supervisor Anton, Supervisor Henning, thank you. That is a unanimous consent. Thank you very much. Supervisor Beckfield. Next is Resolution 055.
To amend Section 2.09.010A of the Code.
Motion? Are you motion by Supervisor Gatlin, second by Supervisor Schaffnagel, explanation by Supervisor Beckfield.
I'd like to take the opportunity to, because she did most of the work on this, our Administrator, Catherine Schaff, please.
Certainly. As part of a yearly process, we meet with employees in what are called employee town halls, and we talk to them about the types of benefits that they receive and any number of other issues. One of the things that we have heard resoundingly many times is that the ability to be flexible for hours of operation is highly valued by our employees. When we first began looking at this, we did an analysis of what other counties around the state actually offer for hours of operation and found that the majority of counties offer hours that only go until 4:30 p.m. We then took the results of the survey from around the state back to our leadership team and asked for their input. It was favorably agreed upon that this would be a change that would not only benefit our employees, but potentially even benefit some of our service from the standpoint of the majority of our service window time happens to be for many of our departments over the lunch hour, so anywhere from around 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And changing the hours of operation at the end of the day does not have a detrimental impact on the service we provide, but actually helps many of those offices that have smaller staffs that they have to work through during that time period. And so we are putting this forward tonight as another piece of the puzzle in overall employee satisfaction as we look at the ways in which we work with our employees, whether through compensation, benefits. There are any number of ways that we can offer to them more flexibility. And this is one where we can offer flexibility that has very little cost to the county, benefit to the employee, and will not detrimentally affect the service we provide.
Are there any questions? Any discussion? Oh, sorry. Supervisor Pagonis.
I have a question. I guess I'm a little confused. Is this suggesting that the courthouse will close at 4:30?
The entire government center. And so one of the things that we have talked about with Judge Schumacher is that initially, as we make the change and work through the change, that the court calendar will have to be worked through. So there will be a time period during which the hours will not be changed for the operation of the courts as they work into the new schedule. It will be a transition.
Well, I guess then I have a question for Corporation Counsel. I thought that operational hours for the register and probate was regulated by statute, and it was required to be open until 5. I hope I'm mistaken on that.
I do not believe that is true. And I'll check for it here to see if I can quick look up the statute, but my understanding is that is not true.
The reason why I thought that was when Clerk of Courts was closing at 4:30, the register and probate remained open and was taking filings for the Clerk of Courts. And so that it became a topic of discussion because I thought she was regulated by statute. You can check on that.
Is this something that we can resolve now?
Correct.
Okay.
And the majority of counties in the state of Wisconsin close at 4:30, including probate, so we'll see what. No? I'm not aware of any.
Do we have an answer, Keith?
Well, my opinion that they do not have to remain open until 5, and I will look for the statute, but I don't have it right now.
I suggest we proceed with the item. Sorry, Supervisor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question regarding many of our committee meetings in the courthouse. Some are at 4:35. Will this change in operational time of the courthouse have any effect on meetings? And so the building will still be open?
That would be correct. The building would still be open and still available for evening meetings. And there are any number of evening meetings that would be conducted. And so that would not change. Also, for many of our offices, what we've talked about with our team is that, especially for those who set appointments, their appointments may still be in the evening. Many of the folks that meet with individuals will meet at a variety of different times. That will not change either.
Thank you.
That's why we say there should be no diminishment in our service.
Supervisor Stelzis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just another clarification. You had mentioned traffic during the noon hour or lunch hour. Does this in any way alter what people have as their lunch or noon hour?
It will change the lunch hour to a half hour instead of a full hour, so that the workday will still be an 8-hour day.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Beckfield.
And on that topic, an employee could continue with the 1 hour and then stay until 5 to complete their work, if I'm understanding it correctly.
That is correct. This does not mean that a manager or team member cannot make changes to their hours to suit either the need of the individuals being served or the employee themselves. We do have flexible office hours for our employees.
Supervisor Moritz.
Yes, and just one more clarification about the courts. This will not create a backup in the courts in the sense that they have half an hour less per day.
It's not a half an hour less per day technically, because we're changing the amount of time that we allow for the lunch period during the middle of the day. So you still have the full 8 hours to actually schedule. Oftentimes, court, even now, will go beyond the 5 o'clock close time. This does not preclude the need for some events to go beyond that 4:30 time period. So it should not detrimentally affect the courts.
So the
either.
answer is no.
Correct.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I see no one indicating a wish to speak. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand. a vote of yes or aye would alter the operation times to 8 to 4:30 with a cutoff time of 4 o'clock for the clerk of.
And there is no statutory requirement that the registered deeds office remain open until 5 o'clock.
Okay. All right. Please proceed to vote. Thank you. That includes me. Sorry.
28, unanimous.
28?
20. 29.
29. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is from the Committee on Judiciary and Law and from Human Services, file number 057.
Requesting and supporting the efforts of Wisconsin, the federal government, cities and villages in Eau Claire County to regulate conversion therapy and prohibit paid conversion therapy by mental health professionals to persons under the age of 18.
Motion by Supervisor Jansen, second by Supervisor Wilkie. Sorry. Explanation, Supervisor Miller, I believe. Right? Thanks. Oh.
There we go.
Should be on.
Yes, well, I'll take this, start it off, but then there will be a few other players and committee members that will certainly want to jump in. As you can see, and as the agenda pointed out, the original resolution actually was initiated by the Human Services Board and then brought to us, as well as the City County Health Department got involved because of all of their healthy communities surveys and work that they have been doing. And they brought forth some material which we then, when I say we, Judiciary and Law, acted upon as far as the amendment. So at this point, what I would like to do is put forth amendment number 1 to the resolution, and then we could proceed from that point.
Please make.
So I move the amendment number 1.
Would you state the amendment, please?
The amendment to the file, or
On the clerk.
It's in the packet.
I'd like to have it read out so the whole board hears it. Oh, quite a bit. Okay.
That's in their packet.
All right. This is what page is in the packet?
Page 40.
Page 40 in your packet.
Yes.
It is a rather lengthy amendment.
Yes, it is.
Perhaps you could make a comment about the intent of the amendment.
Well, that's that. Do I need a second to my motion
Yes,
to amend?
you do.
Okay.
We have a motion to amend. You have the motion in front of you. The second is from Supervisor Leary.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The discussion now is on the amendment.
Correct. Basically, the full resolution had spelled out a lot of information, but what we felt is that on page 2, lines 4 through 6, to strike that whereas and insert the more detailed information about the surveys and the youth that have been studied and the samples and so on. In other words, that line said the healthy communities recognize that the top 3 indicators for concern for youth in Eau Claire County are anxiety, youth, and hopelessness, and youth suicide. We wanted to elaborate that and tie in with what the City County Health Department had been studying and elaborate on that particular anxiety, youth hopelessness, youth suicide by giving you more detail and data. Essentially, that's what the amendment is doing to the main resolution. Just broadening the information and the data that is being provided and has been gathered even here in Eau Claire County in the state of Wisconsin.
Is there any discussion? Are there any questions? Supervisor Wilkie.
The only thing I'd add to that, Supervisor Miller is correct, is there was one small correction there in terms of the name of a particular committee. It was called, in the original resolution, it was called the City County Healthies Community.
Right.
Their actual title is Healthy Community, so that was a correction. And of course, the addition, which Supervisor Miller alluded to, was that the City County Board of Health, after this resolution was viewed by Human Services, also passed a resolution, and we included that in the amendment you'll note their resolve.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? I see no one. Sorry. Supervisor DeLuca.
Yes, I have a question. In the fact sheet on page 45, the final conclusion, I thought when I read, said that county board doesn't have the permission or right.
Excuse me, I think your comment is probably best directed to the main motion.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So I'll come back to you for main motion then.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions or is there any other discussion regarding the amendment? Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and vote. A vote of yes would uphold the amendment. A vote of no would reject the amendment. Okay. That is 29 for the amendment, so it is unanimous. Thank you. We are back to the main motion. I'll now recognize again Supervisor DeLuca.
Okay, so when I was reading through the fact information, the final conclusion was that the county board doesn't have the statutory right to do this amendment, but the city health has, but now we're a city county health. Does that mean that this can't be passed, or?
Sorry, I'll ask the Corporation Counsel to comment.
So that's from my opinion, saying that the county board does not have the authority to regulate conversion therapy. But the state does, federal government does, and cities and villages do. What the actual resolution does not say that the county is passing an ordinance to regulate conversion therapy. What it says is it supports the state requests and supports the efforts of the state of Wisconsin, the federal government, cities and villages in Eau Claire County to regulate conversion therapy and support bills or ordinances introduced in this Senate or assemblies, and blah, blah, blah. And then also that copies of this resolution be provided to state, federal, and local, at the local level representing Eau Claire County and also to the Wisconsin Counties Association. So that is, it's not inconsistent with my opinion, it's consistent with my opinion.
So if we weren't combined city-county health, would the city health department be able to pass this legislation if they were a standalone?
There's a question. I think, you know, what my legal analysis said was that it was clear that the federal government, the state government, and cities, and that also would include villages because of their powers, have the authority to regulate it. The county does not. The city-county health department I also addressed in there, and I said an argument can be made, and it may or may not. It wasn't as clear.
Thank you.
I realized that in the discussion I passed over the Human Services Board and its input. Supervisor Bates, did you have input on?
Yes, I'd like to add something.
Yes, please.
To this. Am I on? I guess. Okay, thank you. This did come to the Human Services Board, and fortunately, we have a stellar board. They're individuals that just have a great deal of understanding of the issues of mental health and of the issues of young people in our community, and it certainly is evident in a lot of the things that we address over the years. So it's not surprising that when this came through, to support the efforts to indeed not have conversion therapy as something that we recognize as being useful. In fact, many indicated that they felt it was detrimental. It's not surprising that the board voted unanimously on this resolution to support. And so the board members, if anyone would like to add anything to that.
Thank you. Supervisor Buchanan.
Thank you. School Board President Joe Luginbill gave a powerful and impassioned speech and explanation of this, so I'm not going to go into a lengthy argument or defense of this ordinance or the arguments on conversion therapy. There are only just a couple of quick areas that I did want to highlight. And I really hope that this doesn't break down in any sort of partisan or political sense, because as you heard, not only from our health department, but from numerous medical agencies across the United States of America and across the world have declared that this conversion therapy is literally a form of torture that kills children. And so even though we as a county cannot regulate it, we can add our voice and say that this is something that we do not welcome personally in our community, and we express our opposition to. The one thing I did want to add, if someone may wonder, why on earth did judiciary and law take this up? That seems to be a little weird, right? I mean, it makes total sense that human services, city, county health, why would judiciary law of all committees take this up? And I said this comment in the committee meeting, and unfortunately Sheriff Kramer isn't here to hear it in this body either. But we need to start thinking a little bit differently about how we look at our committees, and particularly how we look at law enforcement in keeping our communities safe. I mean, first off, yes, we're keeping our communities safe if we can keep kids from going through this torture. But also, when you get the budget, which I see is in front of you, the sheriff highlighted issues of why we see rising crime in our community. And he said these are things that will cause crime to go up. Issues of homelessness, high rates of mental health issues and depression, high usages of alcohol and drug use, that all of those factors go into rising crime. And if we can address those issues on the front end, then maybe we don't have as much to address on the back end in terms of expanding our jail and arrest record. What does that have to do with conversion therapy and this particular ordinance? Well, it's up here. This resolution, not ordinance, excuse me, that right now there are about 1.6 million people who are youths across this country who experience homelessness. And while only 7% of youths identify as LGBT, 40% of the kids who are homeless are LGBT. That the rates of the use of intoxicants can be double that because of issues of depression. And if we're sending our kids through this torture, then that just means more depression, more mental health issues, more issues of homelessness, and thus ultimately tangentially more issues that the sheriff directly says we need to address if we want to reduce crime. So let's think about the front end of the causes of those homelessness, of depression, of mental health, so we don't have to worry about constantly arresting more people. So if you're wondering why this came before judiciary and law, I just wanted to express that we need to think of a new way of that. And I'm really glad it came before committee, and I hope that you'll vote this up.
Thank you. Supervisor Wilkie.
Unfortunately, the county can't do more. You can see from the lengthy Corp Council opinion, we're very limited in our powers. So we're doing the maximum we can with this issue. One, we are raising it up to our community and awareness of that it exists. Some people that I talked to didn't even know such a practice could be done and had been done. So that we've are accomplishing our goal. At the same time, we're asking our state and our federal officials to do something about it. They do have the power. There, in fact, was bills at the state level that got buried in committee and didn't make it to the floor for a vote. I hope next time around that's not the case. Also, our Corp Council's opinion is that towns and municipalities, villages could regulate. Now, of course, they're going to have to get their own Corp Council opinion. our corp council's opinion is only for us, but having a city council member sitting in the audience, they'll be getting a copy of this. I hope that the city, county, or the city will move aggressively on this issue. I would also mention that it's good that we are sending it down to our Wisconsin Counties Association. Now, it won't get in on this convention, but hopefully they will take it up as a resolution and consider lobbying for the bills to move forward to prevent or regulate conversion therapy. I would appreciate your vote in favor of this resolution.
Thank you. Supervisor McKinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In my research in looking at this issue, I was really surprised when I would talk to people who had no understanding of conversion therapy and that this was something that happens regularly. And I know it probably has happened in Eau Claire. There are two major films. One was released in August, and another one coming in November. The one in August is The Miseducation of Cameron Post, and in November, Boy Excused. And both of those films are about conversion therapy of minors. And that, I want to remind us, we're talking about minors, people under 18. So I was proud to be on both committees that signed for this resolution, Human Services and Judiciary. So I support this resolution, encourage everyone else to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Cronk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also am part of the Human Services Board and am really happy to see this coming forward as a resolution and strongly support. I just want to kind of provide a little bit of a, I appreciate everybody's points, a little bit of an extra point, I should say, not necessarily a different one. But in 1952, the American Psychological Association published the first diagnostic and statistical manual of mental health disorders, including homosexuality listed. It was not removed until 1973 per se, and it was completely taken out in 1986. So having said that, there were practices that were formed to treat the mental health disorder that are clearly not effective, not evidence-based, and outdated. Sorry, I don't know why I got nervous. And I just want to say, as we really look to increase mental health, much needed mental health in our area, that we really look at practices that are evidence-based, true therapies, and as we move forward to be inclusive, not just in our language, but in our policies. And in this resolution, I think it's sending a strong message, so thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any further questions? I see none. Supervisors, please take your pad in hand and vote. A vote of yes would be a vote to request and support the efforts of the state of Wisconsin, federal government, cities, and villages to regulate conversion therapy and support bills or ordinances that would regulate and prohibit paid conversion therapy. As amended. Thank you. I'm sorry, 29 to nothing. That's the unanimous. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is file number 022 from the Committee on Planning and Development.
To amend section 18.60.040 of the code, definitions, and to amend section 18.60.110D4 of the code, district regulations.
Motion? Motion by Supervisor Lavelle, second by Supervisor Dunning. Explanation, Supervisor Gibson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is just an update in language. This was brought to P&D by...
Excuse me, Supervisor Gibson, is your microphone on?
Yeah.
I'm having some difficulty hearing.
Really?
Is it just
Can you
me?
hear me now?
Can you all hear?
Move it closer to him.
I don't know, red light's on. Working. How about if I put my mouth right?
Oh, much better, thank you.
Never had to do that
I thought
before.
it was me.
I figured I was loud enough anyway. No.
Okay.
No, this was brought to Planning and Development from Charity out at the airport because she had a lot of concerns with structures and cranes and stuff like that. So we reviewed this at Planning and Development Committee level. And all this does is just giving additional language to provide clarity to the structure definitions out there at the airport when they review permit by Eau Claire County or Chippewa County. So I would just encourage everybody to vote in favor of it. It's pretty simple one.
Thank you. Are there any questions or is there any discussion?
Yeah.
I see no one indicating a desire to speak. Therefore, please take your keypads in hand and vote.
Yeah.
Supervisor Gatlin, thank you. Supervisor Miller? Oh, she's not here. Can you change that? Oh, she is here.
You want to?
Supervisor Miller, do you wish to vote? Thank you. It is 29-0. That is passed unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is from the Committee on Parks and Forests, file number 061.
Granting a utility easement to the Eau Claire Energy Cooperative in Section 18, Township 27N, Range 7 West, in the town of Seymour.
Motion? Supervisor Beckfield. Second, Supervisor DeLuca. Explanation, Supervisor Stelches.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry.
There we go, okay.
A little slow on the uptake, thank you.
That's okay. This is pretty mundane, but nevertheless important. The local utility co-op wants to put underground lines in lieu of overhead lines that will be used not only to supply Beaver Creek, which of course are county-owned facilities, and it also is in preparation for some major work along County Highway K, which will change the grade of that road as it approaches the K Bridge on both ends. So now is the time to bury the lines. So everybody is in favor of that, and I would request your support.
Are there any questions, further discussion? I see no indication of a desire to speak. Therefore, please take your pads in hand and vote accordingly. Well, that is 29-0. That has passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is file number 061 from the Committee on Parks and, file number 052 from the Committee on Finance and Budget.
Amending Section 4.15.010A of the Code, fees of professional examiners and witnesses in Chapter 51, involuntary commitment proceedings.
Motion. Supervisor Bates, second. Sorry.
Anderson? Or who?
Oh, Supervisor Anderson, I'm sorry. We have a motion and a second explanation. Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Am I on? This happens pretty much annually. The psychiatrists and psychologists and physicians are required to do reports, sometimes in criminal actions, always in mental health commitments, and so they're pretty important to our operations. This year, they've asked for an increase in fees, but the increase is modest. The physicians and psychiatrists are asking for a $10 increase, and the psychologists are asking for a $5 increase. This is, as compared to other years, this is considered modest. This is primarily a housekeeping action because I don't think we have a lot of choices. So.
Thank you. Are there any questions or is there any further discussion? I see no indication of a wish to speak to this point. Supervisors, please take your pad in hand and vote. That is 29-0. That is passed unanimously. The next item is file number 059.
Amending the budget and appropriating additional revenues and expenditures.
Motion, Supervisor Beckfield. Second, Supervisor Pagonis. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you. The title of this resolution is worded a little oddly. What this is that grants were received during the year. So the budget has to be amended to reflect that additional grants being revenue came in during the 2018 that wasn't previously reflected in the budget. So if you decide to vote against it, it would be odd because this is additional money to the county.
Thank you for that clarification.
But it is getting.
Is there any further discussion? Are there any other questions? I see no indication of a desire to speak. Supervisors, please take your pads in hand and vote. That is 29-0, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item is file 064.
Authorizing payment of vouchers over $10,000 issued during the month of August 2018.
Motion, Supervisor Lavelle. Second, Supervisor Gatlin. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
I don't have anything to say about it. We have these every month.
Right. Are there any questions or any discussion? I see no indication. Please take your pads in hand and vote.
It was, she said. But she said it was a voided check.
Supervisor Maury, Supervisor Gatlin. Supervisor Gatlin, are you? Okay. The vote is 28-1. The motion passes. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is file 066.
Authorizing a transfer from the 2018 contingency fund in the amount of $10,000 for additional 2018 election cost.
Sorry, motion. Supervisor Miller, second Supervisor DeLuca. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Yes, thank you. So at the beginning of years where we have quite a few elections, we have to estimate, project how many people we think will be voting, and then get the appropriate number of ballots. This year, we underestimated. It's been a bang-up year for the elections. There are 4 elections this year, and obviously we have a gubernatorial and Senate election coming up in November. So this is to make a transfer out of our contingency fund to the county clerk for the purposes of ordering additional ballots. The contingency fund, as you would have seen in your packet, is right now at about $214,000. So it would be reducing it to $200,000. Given that it's this late in the year, I don't think it would be too concerning. I do want to remind everyone. Well, number one, we have an obligation to make sure that the municipalities have the ballots they need. And number two, unless there were some disaster and a roof fell in the courthouse, we still have $200,000 in our contingency. We need a 2/3 vote of this body to approve this transfer.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Is there any discussion? As Supervisor Pagonis has pointed out, this requires a 2/3 vote. That would be 20 affirmative votes. Please take your keypads in hand and vote. Supervisor Knight, thank you. The vote is 29-0, unanimous. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is listed as appointments. We have no materials on that in our packet, and I have no materials here regarding that. So I'm going to consider that an empty agenda item and declare our agenda completed. Therefore, this meeting is now adjourned. Yay.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.